thesis that we're in dangerous times. They're so dangerous that I think at some point or other there will be no other solution than a mass uprising. But a mass uprising will take a lot of organizing. And I think one of the ways in which we have to think about that organizing is bringing together the multitude of movements that are around, which are struggling in this place and that place against this injustice here and that injustice there, against this environmental degradation here and that environmental degradation there, a land grab somewhere else, a politics of dispossession going on in various parts of the world. All those things somehow or other have to be brought together around some sort of other vision. And it seems to me that there may be two things we should be doing at this conference, which is, one is defining exactly why these times are so dangerous, and defining exactly why the moves we should make should move in one direction rather than another. And in thinking about this, I was very moved by Tony Benn reminding us of the struggle against slavery. And there's a very, I think, for me, a very moving interaction at the end of the novel Cloud Atlas, in which the son-in-law of a wealthy merchant who engages in the slave trade announces he's going over to the abolitionist side, and his father-in-law says to him, he says, "You can't go against the natural order, you're just being stupid, absolutely stupid, you're ruining the family fortune, and in any case, you're just merely a drop in the ocean and nothing's going to work." On which the son-in-law returns to him and says, "But what is an ocean but a multitude of drops?" I think it's a beautiful, beautiful metaphor, and I don't cite it to support Hart and Negri, but I do suggest that all of us think of ourselves as drops in an ocean, but as a multitude of drops we can do far, far more than I think we're doing. Part of the problem right now, it seems to me, is a mass sense of disempowerment, a mass alienation which is almost going inwards, so that people are eating at themselves rather than eating at the system, and you see many, many signs of this. For example, a survey of people who've been foreclosed upon in the United States showed that most of the people regarded the fault as their own. It was their fault, it was not the systemic fault. And I think that therefore there is a mass educational project to be launched here to try to actually educate people into the systemic qualities of why these are such dangerous times. And I think we have to be prepared to differentiate a little bit between what you might call epiphenomena, you know, what happened yesterday and what happened there, to have an ability to respond to that epiphenomena, because you can't let it ever ride by, but at the same time to do it in a way which is constantly having, if you like, some larger vision, some sense of a greater set of issues that need to be addressed. In my own work, I've been very much concerned with trying to actually understand contradictions of capital. And the idea that capital, which is the economic engine which powers capitalism, and I like to differentiate between capitalism and capital, but the economic engine that powers capitalism is itself in serious difficulty and serious trouble. And the difficulty, I think, is represented most of all by the fact that there are seemingly no new ideas about what to do about the contradictions of capital. That in the 1930s a new set of ideas arose which had a lot to do with state intervention and Keynesian kind of demand management. And through those techniques, in a sense, a recovery of capital was engineered in the post-war period in such a way that there was relatively strong growth through the advanced capitalist world, and of course attached also to imperialist endeavors and colonialist endeavors elsewhere. But at least from the standpoint of capital, this was relatively a stable period of growth and development, and it managed to bring into possibility for large segments of in the advanced capitalist countries of working class people to participate in some of the gains that were made, and that participation was aided by the fact that labour organisation was strong, and the demand management was very much connected to the demands of the working class movement, which became stronger and stronger. The 1970s saw a counter-revolution against all of that, which moved from demand management into supply management. And the supply management involved making labour much more pliable, much more easily exploitable, much higher rate of exploitation. And this supply management, in a sense, unified what to me is, I think, a very interesting kind of concept that comes out of my reading of Marx's Capital. I've just finished the Volume 2 companion written version, and its relationship to Volume 1 is very interesting, because in Volume 1 you essentially get a supply-side analysis of capital, and the question of production is taken up. In Volume 2 you get a demand-side analysis, and there you get the question of the market and realization. And Marx and the Grundrisse argued that there is a contradictory unity between production and realization, which suggests that we should really be thinking in terms of the unity of the Volume 1 and the Volume 2 analysis. And when you do that, what you see is there is really no exit for capital from those two possible forms of management. And what we see right now is a world divided between, on the one hand, austerity, continuing the supply side stuff going on in Europe and North America to some degree, and then the demand side, which is really being set up by China through a mass urbanization process and a mass infrastructural demand kind of creation. And the result, of course, is that China has entrained large chunks of the global economy into its own orbit. So that in Latin America you see a sort of booming economy around supplying China with soybeans and all the rest of it. If you go to Chile, it's booming. If you go to Australia, it's booming, and it's been booming right throughout this crisis. So the world is partitioned, and we shouldn't imagine that the future of capital is defined simply by austerity. One half of the world is engaging in austerity politics, the other part is doing a demand management, sort of Keynesian type politics. But neither of those solutions are stable. And in fact, what you're seeing in China is the possibility of it blowing up. In fact, the Chinese boom is very similar to the kind of housing boom that we saw in the United States and Ireland and Spain in the preceding sort of 10, 15 years. And there's a lot of instability in China for that reason, and the same way we're seeing the austerity politics is not working here. So neither solution of the supply side or the demand side is really working. And it's very interesting that there is no new analysis to come out of it. And that no new analysis, I think, suggests there's a failure on the part of the bourgeoisie to have any kind of analysis of how to get out of the dilemmas that they are now in, apart from doing what they've done always in the past, which is to invent fictions and fantasies which really can't last. In other words, what we're seeing is a recreation of various asset bubbles all over the place. So if that is the situation economically, why would I say this is so dangerous? Well, the danger, I think, lies in the following kind of problem. There is something called compound growth, and what's interesting to me is whenever you mention it, and I've noticed this in some of the books I've been reading recently, whenever people mention compound growth, they feel obligated to explain it at great length, because people really don't get it. But compounding rates of growth create exponential growth rates. You get a curve that goes like this. For a long time, things are going sort of very slowly, and then they start to get an inflection point, and then they go very fast. And at the end, you get what's called a singularity, or you're in danger of getting a singularity, where the thing just explodes completely upwards, like this. Now, in environmental questions, the exponentiality of pollution and things is a very serious problem, but what in effect capital has done is grown exponentially at around 3% per annum since around 1800 or something like that, and it's grown exponentially. Now that means that you have to find larger and larger amounts of profitable investment opportunities, and they are simply not there. And so what begins to happen is, since the capacity of investing in production is not there, you have to actually invent consumer demand, and the only way you could do that was, of course, by inventing the credit system and the ATM machines and all the rest of it. So again, one of the things that begins to happen is you get an exponential rise in debt. Now let's get clear about the debt. This is the only way that capital is currently surviving. So if the Republicans in the United States have their way and they eliminate the debt, they'll actually eliminate capitalism. And I think that's actually a very interesting idea. And so I'm cheering the Republicans on there and hope that they manage to do it. Because then we'll have to really find the alternative. And this then, it says that what we have to do is to start to actually fight a battle around the end of exponential growth. that we cannot have a permanent exponential growing economy forever. That is a sheer impossibility for environmental reasons, for political reasons, for other structural reasons. And the only way, in fact, you can feed that exponential growth right now is by creating money. And of course, it's a wonderful thing. You see, suddenly the Federal Reserve in the United States announces it's going to release, I don't know, another $1 trillion, and then it creates another $1 trillion. And don't you wish you had that power? And so actually there is this incredible money creation going on, which is absolutely not based in any real production. It's not based in any real value creation whatsoever. So what we're seeing is, if you like, a kind of society which is teetering on the edge of what seems to me a major catastrophic fall. And if there's a major catastrophic fall, we have to be prepared, I think, to pick up the reins. And as Lindsay mentioned earlier, one of the things we have to do is to start to reconfigure and figure out how we're going to run an economy which is not based upon perpetual growth, and is not based on exponential growth, but is also a redistributive economy in which can somehow or other guarantee everybody in the world a reasonable living standard and a reasonable living environment, and can actually give us some of the most important things that we need, and we create an economy which is based on use values, not exchange values, which is not based on money, which is based much more on the requirements of an active kind of society. This is going to take a lot of imagination. There are a lot of movements out there. There are solidarity economies, there are worker takeovers, there are recuperated factories, there are alternative money systems, there are all kinds of things out there going on which are actually exploring the alternatives. And one of the things that I think the left has to do right now is to drop its rather sectarian view as to what is a good kind of politics and start to look at the whole panoply of all of the possibilities that exist there and say, let's embrace all of them and see what possibilities exist there for reconstructing the economy around radically different principles than those to which we have actually in the past adhered. This leads me, if you like, to one other observation, which you may not find a very good one, which is that many of the struggles which go on right now are not like abolishing slavery. They're reactive policies, they're reactive struggles which are trying to protect something. How we're going to run an economy which is not based upon perpetual growth, and is not based on exponential growth, but is also a redistributive economy in which can somehow or other guarantee everybody in the world a reasonable living standard and a reasonable living environment, and can actually give us some of the most important things that we need, and we create an economy which is based on use values, not exchange values, which is not based on money, which is based much more on the requirements of an active kind of society. This is going to take a lot of imagination. There are a lot of movements out there. There are solidarity economies, there are worker takeovers, there are recuperated factories, there are alternative money systems, there are all kinds of things out there going on which are actually exploring the alternatives. And one of the things that I think the left has to do right now is to drop its rather sectarian view as to what is a good kind of politics and start to look at the whole panoply of all of the possibilities that exist there and say, let's embrace all of them and see what possibilities exist there for reconstructing the economy around radically different principles than those to which we have actually in the past adhered. This leads me, if you like, to one other observation, which you may not find a very good one, which is that many of the struggles which go on right now are not like abolishing slavery. They're reactive policies, they're reactive struggles which are trying to protect something that already exists. Now, one of the lessons we should have learned from the 1970s, that trying to fight a huge rearguard and very noble battle against deindustrialization in this country failed. And you have to understand why it failed. And we have to be careful not to put ourselves in a position right now like struggling to preserve something that is on its way out. And there's one, I think, important indicator of all of this. It is very significant on the exponential side that the technological evolution right now is exponential also. The capacity of computers is doubling every 2 years. And the result of that is we're moving heavily into the realm of automation, and with the possibility of automation, not simply in the blue-collar jobs, but in the white-collar jobs, in services, and even in high area. In the future, people are talking in America now about you won't need radiologists anymore, It will be done by computer. The other day, I think British Airlines flew a plane which was pilotless. Soon we'll be actually going across the Atlantic in a pilotless plane. Why not? I mean, we have, you know, trains with no drivers. Soon, that's all going to go, and it's going to go very fast. And one of the things we can do is to say, well, if it's going to be automated that way, then how do we construct a world which doesn't require creating jobs which are meaningless? In other words, why don't we think in radically alternative different ways about the construction of an alternative socialist world which is based on this new technological capacities and powers, and do it in a way which has socialist principles involved in it. And not fight simply rearguard battles and celebrate, you know, something which is gone, not have nostalgia for a working class that's lost in this country, even though it's very alive and well in China and Bangladesh and all the rest of it. Why don't we really start to rethink some of our own presuppositions? The left, I think, has been very conservative, very frequently orthodoxly conservative, and we have therefore, I think, to become much more progressive and much more open to a whole range of new possibilities and new ideas based on the view that the current economy is going to collapse. Almost certainly in the next 10 or 15 years it's going to undergo a major collapse of some kind, and we have to be prepared to step in and rebuild it on the basis of the technologies that will then be available, on the basis of the new capacities and powers which are being created organisationally. That is what we have to do. And with that, we also have to remember what I said at the very beginning. We are, all of us, drops in the multitude of the ocean. Thank you.